Now, this idea of fearing God, we can understand it pretty well by thinking about what it's contrasted to. Fearing God would be in contrast to thinking him detached and therefore to be ignored. Fear of God would be in contrast to thinking him incompetent and therefore to be treated with disdain. Fear of God would be in contrast to thinking him limited or impotent and therefore to be scorned. Fear of God is in contrast to thinking him corrupt and therefore to be admonished. Fearing God would be in contrast to thinking him short-sighted and therefore to be advised. Fearing God would be in contrast to thinking him petty and therefore to be resented. Fearing God has this idea of taking God seriously. We need to do that lest we fall into any of those other traps of thinking of him as less than God. Now it's interesting that when this verse talks about the fear of God, it talks about the fear of Adonai, not the fear of Yahweh. This is a really interesting choice. It's not fear of Elohim. It's fear of Adonai. This is the only occurrence of Adonai in the book. Adonai in Hebrew can be used just to refer to an authority figure, whether it's a human or whether it's a god. It's often used as a title for Yahweh, but often used in connection with Yahweh itself. So it's very interesting here that we have not fear of Shaddai, not fear of Elohim, not fear of Yahweh, but fear of Adonai. And it's also put in the mouth of God. This is God speaking. He said to the human race, the fear of Adonai, that is wisdom. So it's God himself speaking that way. Nowhere else in the Old Testament does God refer to himself simply by the title Adonai, without some other label connected to it. So this is a really interesting choice of words here. This is part of what we do when we analyze text. We assume that the choice of words is meaningful, intentional, and purposeful. And so we consider them carefully. Now again, Adonai draws out the issue of authority. It has the sense of Lord or Master. And it draws out the element of submission to authority. That's something that's very needed in this context. Submitting to this God by fearing him. So unlike the similar saying in Proverbs, where the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, here the fear of Adonai is wisdom. It's wise to trust God as the path to the wisdom. The definite form with a definite article is used both in verses 12 and 20. The wisdom. Fear of the Lord, then, finally, is paralleled with an ethical exhortation to shun evil. It's not paralleled to ritual observance. So again, that's something that we need to be aware of.